Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Dr. Kish. I'm a dyslexic, I'm a doctor, I'm a digital innovator, and I'm an educator, among a few other things and interests that I do. We're here today in a nice, relaxed, informal conversation, essentially to talk about health issues that are important. It's going to be about cancer today. Obviously, within COVID and the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had a lot of issues around people not necessarily getting cancer care and cancer treatment that they need. And we're live streaming on both the What Med Media YouTube page as well as my YouTube channel as well. And the reason that I'd like to do this is because essentially an amazing lecture that Amelia Beltrao gave to my medical students at Hull York Medical School on Monday. And in that lecture, she talks about cancer and her story with cancer and how she found a voice in terms of speaking up when it comes to using social media and communicating cancer. Hey, Tricia, how you doing? So before we start, I want to say thank you. Thank you for everybody who's joining today. Thank you to everybody whose contributions on Sunday when I was preparing the lecture. Jeff Cross making some comments about how in the 90s, when he was diagnosed with bladder papilloma, which spread to his kidneys in the days where information just wasn't there, as well as Jen Sloan, Franklin Percival, loads and loads, Nick Wellborn, so many people that you can't mention them all, but it was really, really helpful, and it was really, really interesting for my medical students to hear that. Also, thank you for you guys for joining today. But also, above all, thank you to Amelia Beltrao, who gave us some time and came to chat to the medical students that I teach at Hull York Medical School. So, for those of you just joining, on the 1st of March, we were joined at HIMSS, where I'm giving a series of lectures essentially around the use of social media and technology and communication, especially in a COVID pandemic world or COVID-19 world. And as we said on Monday, we were joined by Amelia Beltrao, who's a journalist, and she's also the daughter of Jackie Beltrao, who is the Olympic gymnast and sports reporter on Sky News, or presenter, sorry. And she gave a really interesting and a really unique account in terms of cancer. So I thought what I'd do is we would talk about that video today. And it's in the links, it's in the descriptions. Feel free to go. And thanks, Sean. Yeah, I need to get it cut, really. I thought you guys could watch it if you're interested, and we'll reflect on the most interesting bits. And it's only going to be a short video, really, maybe 15, 20 minutes. But then depends on if you guys have questions and comments. We can move into more of a sort of free-flowing Q&A style piece as well. All right. So here's some reflections then. So it was really interesting to hear from Amelia that for some, cancer is still very much yes, Sean, indeed. For some, cancer is very much still a taboo subject. But as a physician and as a doctor, I take the view that not speaking out may ultimately cost lives, in addition to causing a significant amount of anguish, whether that be for the patients themselves with cancer symptoms who are not being diagnosed on time, or for their friends, family, relatives, and carers. And then Amelia also went on to talk about how she found social media the second time round her mum had cancer as a bit of a lifeline, and she was able to speak out. And obviously my interest in that is we've got these communication technologies available to all of us. So how do we really leverage them and get the most from them and ultimately improve people's care? So in the video today, we're going to talk about Amelia's story, but I'd really like this to be more part of an ongoing dialogue and conversation moving further forward, where you guys can get involved with the teaching, with the medical students if you're interested, or commenting on this, and you can shape that process. So in terms of Amelia's story, when she was 16 years old, when her mum was first diagnosed with breast cancer, it was very different to the second time around last year when she was 22 years old. And both experiences were very different, and I'm sure they will resonate for anybody who has had to deal with a loved one having cancer. And the first time, in terms of Amelia's story, they kept it a secret. She was only 16 at the time. Their parents just handled it, dealt with it, which I'm sure is common for many people with cancer. But then the second time, she was in the driving seat, in her own words, in terms of how she was going to communicate this with her friends. And Instagram was the chosen method of communication. And so, yeah, I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was interesting in terms of how it's quite a common thing for people, to want to delay recognizing or taking note of the fact that they have symptoms, and then wanting to try and deal with it by themselves, and then not telling their friends, family, loved ones about it. Amelia's reflections in her story, on that link, if you check it out in the description, she talks about how it was very different when she was younger, and she remembers thinking that she was the only one at school doing her GCSEs who really knew anyone with cancer, but that wasn't necessarily true. It's just lots of people didn't talk about it. And I think now, in a pandemic world where people are struggling, people are isolated, people are not necessarily having that social contact that humans thrive on, then we really need to utilize these technologies and these tools at our disposal to connect and learn from each other, but also provide an outlet so people can share if they have got concerns. And to demonstrate how much Amelia wasn't involved in the process when her mum first got cancer, she tells us about how in 2013 it was New Year's Eve that the kids found out, but her parents actually found out in Christmas Eve, but they didn't want to ruin Christmas and they just wanted to handle it themselves. And then it was fascinating to hear Amelia talk about how important it was. I'm sorry to hear that. Beth Bex Lewis died a couple of weeks ago of COVID and metastatic breast cancer. She blogged regularly about her cancer. So important that we have an open dialogue about this. But then what Amelia was saying in her story the second time round is she, having gone through the process of being a passenger, essentially, well-intentioned. It wasn't as if her parents were deliberately wanting to keep it from her. They just thought that was the best thing to do. The second time around last year, she took to Instagram, which is her preferred method of social media, initially mainly just to communicate with her friends. Because her mum's in the public domain and is tweeting and talking about her cancer, she was unsure about what her friends knew, what her friends didn't know. Therefore, it was easier for her to communicate it and put it out there. So I thought that was interesting. Obviously, not everybody is going to have a loved one, parent, relative in the public domain, but we are all certainly potentially isolated in this current environment. So she basically used it as an opportunity to summarize feelings that she had and deal with any troubles that she had rather than her suffering in silence. Because she found the first time when she didn't do this, it wasn't particularly healthy for her. And she was reflecting back to a time in school when the RE teacher, I think it was, had a little bit of an issue with something that she did. And it basically left in a situation where she was in tears in the classroom and really struggled because she didn't really want to tell people at school the first time round as well. I can also reflect on a piece where she said that when she was at school, she didn't want to be treated different to any of her other friends and colleagues. So I'm just going down and having a look. And then in 24 minutes in the video, in the link, if you go and look at it, she talks about where 24 minutes and 14 seconds, I believe. So in June, there was a kind of ominous atmosphere when she came home, Amelia, and she saw her mum hunched, talking to the doctor, and Amelia could kind of tell immediately that something was wrong. And she immediately ran upstairs crying to her dad, and the brothers knew that her mum was getting a phone call from the doctor and they expected this. And this is amazing how she goes, so I kind of instantly knew. And that it was in that split second I was brought back to that moment when I was in that lesson crying, and I thought that I'm not doing that again. This woman now is going to be the sole focus for my life. She is the most important thing that's happening in my life, and it doesn't matter what I'm going through, Amelia says. She was going to put her mum first and do everything possible. And that was fascinating to hear how she said that she turned driver in terms of driving her mum to chemotherapy. It was fascinating to hear how that she upskilled herself on cancer and chemotherapy and remission. So she went into doctors' consultations armed with better knowledge and more information, and took a really active part in that. We've only gone to that's only the first 27 minutes worth of the video, and she talks very eloquently for about, it was a 1 hour, 23-minute session. She probably talks for about an hour. And towards the end of the session, she also takes students' questions, because there was a whole group of medical students that were asking questions. These are obviously medical students that don't get access to patients currently because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is well worth a watch. So what I'd encourage you to do, because we're wrapping up this video now, is head over to the YouTube channel, give it a subscribe, look at the video, see the lecture that Amelia and I gave for Hull York Medical School. And if there's anything that you would like to talk about, and if you'd like to do some stuff with the medical students, please do get in touch in the comments underneath and below. You'd really be helping them out, because as I said, they're not getting on the wards, and they're not getting that contact opportunity with patients. And this is the future. Virtual consultations, virtual communication, virtual clinical skills is going to be absolutely the future, even after the pandemic. So you would be getting involved in something from the ground up, which is really, really exciting, really, really interesting. And we would really value your thoughts, your contributions, and your expertise. So please do check out the video. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes to see if there's any comments from anyone that's watching. And if not, we'll call it an evening. And I'd really encourage you to just go over to the YouTube channel and click on Amelia's story and see if anything resonates with you, and see if you'd like to get involved with us in terms of the teaching. Just trying to see comments. Hold on. Top chat.